Welcome, dear listener. Settle yourself comfortably. Let the weight of the day fall from your shoulders. Breathe slowly and allow your mind to soften as we begin a new journey into one of the most enduring and haunting myths of all time, the tale of Prometheus. This story is not only about gods and titans, but about us, about what it means to be human, about the cost of knowledge, the burden of freedom, and the fire that burns in every one of us. Tonight, we begin with the Titan himself, the figure whose name means forethought. Prometheus was not like the other Titans. The Titans, children of Gaia and Uranus, were vast beings who ruled the cosmos before the Olympians rose. They were powers of raw force, Kronos with his sickle, Atlas with his shoulders, Oceanus with his endless rivers. Many of them were toppled in the Titanomachy, defeated by Zeus and his siblings, and cast into the depths of Tartarus. Yet Prometheus endured, not as an enemy, but as something more complex, more subtle. He was cunning, clever, thoughtful. His very name, forethought, suggests what made him different. Where others relied on strength, he relied on intelligence. Where others looked only at the present, he looked ahead. Prometheus was the son of the Titan Iapetus and the Oceanid Clymene. His brothers were Atlas, doomed to hold the heavens on his shoulders; Menoetius, struck down by Zeus for his arrogance; and Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought, forever contrasted with Prometheus's foresight. Already the family of Iapetus seemed marked by fate. Strength punished, arrogance destroyed, afterthought deceived. Only Prometheus, with his gift of forethought, would play a role that lingered in human memory for all ages. During the great war between the Titans and the Olympians, Prometheus and Epimetheus chose not to side with their kin. They saw that the rule of Kronos was ending, that the future belonged to Zeus and his siblings, and so they aligned themselves with Olympus, offering counsel rather than rebellion. Prometheus's foresight told him where the tides of fate were turning, and his choice saved him from the fate of so many other Titans. While his brothers Atlas and Menoetius suffered eternal punishments, Prometheus walked free, yet his freedom was not without cost, for destiny had marked him for a different kind of suffering. In the stories told by the poets, Prometheus was not simply a survivor of the war of the gods. He became a craftsman, a teacher, a benefactor. Some myths credit him with shaping humanity itself, fashioning men out of clay, kneading the dust of the earth with the waters of rivers, and giving them form. Then Athena, goddess of wisdom, breathed life into these clay figures, and so the first mortals awoke, fragile but alive. Other myths say that Prometheus did not create man, but became his champion, the one who cared for mortals when the gods ignored them. In either version, his role was the same. Prometheus stood on the side of humanity, a titan who looked down with pity and saw creatures weak, shivering, vulnerable, yet filled with potential. In the time before fire, mortals lived like shadows. They had no warmth to protect them from the cold, no light to pierce the darkness, no flame to cook their food, no spark to harden metal or forge weapons. They were creatures of the dusk, trembling in the forests, prey to beasts, surviving without power. The gods, from their thrones, looked upon mankind as an afterthought, amusing at best, insignificant at worst. But Prometheus did not see them this way. He saw in them something waiting to be kindled, something that could rise beyond weakness if given a chance. And so, from the very beginning, there was tension between Zeus and Prometheus. Zeus, newly crowned king of the gods, wished to keep mortals dependent, humble forever beneath the power of Olympus. But Prometheus wished to lift them higher. Where Zeus saw fragile creatures to be ruled, Prometheus saw potential companions, builders, thinkers, dreamers. Already, in this contrast, we see the seeds of rebellion. One of the earliest tales of Prometheus shows his cunning not in theft, but in deception. At Mekone, during a great sacrifice, Prometheus prepared two offerings for Zeus to choose from: In one, he hid the rich, nourishing meat beneath the rough, ugly hide of an ox, disguising the good as undesirable. In the other, he placed only bones but covered them with glistening fat, making them appear rich and tempting. Zeus, deceived by appearances, chose the bones and fat, leaving the true meat for mankind. In this way, Prometheus won for mortals the right to keep the best of sacrifices for themselves, while the gods received only smoke and bone. This story was not only a myth, but an explanation of ritual practice. The Greeks, when they sacrificed animals, burned the bones and fat to the gods and kept the meat for themselves. Prometheus's trick at Mecone explained why this was so, but beneath ritual lies rebellion. In deceiving Zeus, Prometheus challenged the order of Olympus, placing human need above divine pride. It was an act of defiance, small yet profound, the first spark of a fire that would soon blaze. Zeus, of course, was not blind to this trick. He knew he had been deceived, and his anger smoldered. He resolved to punish mankind for Prometheus's insolence. It was then that he devised a cruel plan to withhold fire itself from the mortals. Without fire, they could not cook, could not forge, could not warm themselves. It was as though Zeus sought to return them to the shadows, to strip away the potential Prometheus had glimpsed. And here, the stage was set for the great theft that would define Prometheus forever. The Titan of forethought would not watch humanity suffer. He would act, and in acting he would bring upon himself the eternal wrath of Zeus. But that, dear listener, is a tale for another night, another chapter. For now, we leave Prometheus standing at the edge of his choice, to obey the King of Gods and watch mankind languish in darkness, or to defy Olympus itself, to steal what only the gods possessed and to give it as a gift to mortals. His name, Forethought, tells us the answer was already clear. He would think ahead, not for himself, but for humankind. And in that decision, in the silence after the great war of the Titans, when the dust of battle had settled and the Olympians claimed their thrones, the world was vast and wild, filled with beasts, forests, mountains, and seas. The gods dwelled above on shining Olympus, while mortals were still little more than shadows, fragile creatures clinging to the edges of existence. It was in this age that Prometheus turned his gaze toward humanity, and in him stirred the thought that mortals could become more than they were. Some say Prometheus was the very creator of mankind. From the clay of the earth, moist with the waters of rivers, he shaped figures in his likeness, kneading soil into flesh, sculpting limbs, forming eyes, ears, mouths. The clay was lifeless at first, but Athena, goddess of wisdom and breath, bent low and whispered life into them. Their eyes opened, their lungs filled, their hearts began to beat. From the earth they rose, fragile yet alive. To be born of clay is to be born humble, bound always to the soil from which we came. Yet in this simple material lay the foundation of human destiny. Other poets tell the tale differently. They say mankind already existed, wandering weak and helpless, little more than animals. Prometheus did not shape them, but instead became their guardian and teacher, guiding them toward civilization. In this version, he was not father but protector, the one who recognized that in these fragile creatures lay something worth nurturing. Whichever version we choose, the essence remains the same. Humanity was Prometheus's concern. He alone among the gods and titans cared for mortals. He looked upon their trembling forms, without fur to protect them from the cold, without claws or fangs to defend themselves, without wings to escape, without strength to rival beasts, and he pitied them. They had potential, but no tools to realize it. They had spirit, but no means to shape the world. Prometheus resolved to change this. He became their teacher, their bringer of knowledge. To mankind, he gave the skills of survival, the arts that would transform them from shadows into shapers of destiny. He taught them to build shelters from wood and stone, to weave fabrics for warmth, to tame animals for labor and companionship. He showed them the stars and taught them to mark the passage of seasons, to know when to sow and when to reap. He gave them numbers, letters, memory, and thought. The poet Aeschylus, in his tragedy Prometheus Bound, imagines Prometheus himself speaking of his gifts. I gave them numbers, and the art of writing, and memory, mother of the muses, and I taught them to yoke beasts to the plough, to sail ships across the sea, to read the flight of birds, to heal with herbs, to mine the earth for hidden riches. In this vision, Prometheus was the bringer of civilization, the one who lifted humanity out of darkness. Without him, mortals would have remained helpless, bound to ignorance and fear. With him, they became thinkers, builders, dreamers. Yet even with these gifts, something was missing. For all their knowledge, mortals remained bound by cold nights, raw food, unworked metals, and the weakness of their flesh. What they needed was fire, the divine spark that transforms clay into brick, ore into metal, meat into nourishment. Fire was not simply warmth, it was power. It was the difference between shadow and civilization, between surviving and shaping. But fire belonged only to the gods. Zeus had decreed it so, for he feared what mankind might do with such a force. To grant mortals fire would be to make them too strong, too independent, too close to the divine. Prometheus knew this, and yet he also knew that without fire, all his teachings would come to nothing. In creating or guiding humanity, Prometheus had already crossed a boundary. He had already chosen to favor mortals over gods. To go further, to steal fire, would mean open defiance of Zeus. But in his heart, Prometheus had already chosen. His name, Forethought, meant he could not help but see the future. And he saw a future where humanity did not remain trembling in the dark, but rose into light. The image of Prometheus kneeling in the dirt, hands wet with clay, shaping the first men and women, or bending low to whisper words of knowledge into their ears, is among the most enduring of all Greek myths. It speaks of a god who was not content to sit upon Olympus, who did not ignore the fragile beings crawling upon the earth. Instead, he entered their world, shared in their struggles, and gave them tools to endure. Philosophically, the myth of Prometheus's creation of man is not only about origins, it is about responsibility. To create is to become bound. By shaping mortals, or by teaching them, Prometheus bound himself to them. He became their advocate, their ally, their patron. Their suffering became his suffering, their progress his triumph. In this, Prometheus reflects the truth that to care for something is to be changed by it, to carry its burden as your own. For us, listening now, the story of Prometheus shaping or guiding mankind resonates deeply. We too are creatures of clay, fragile and fleeting. Yet we are also creatures of fire, gifted with knowledge, restless with invention. The myth tells us that our condition is not accident, but gift, and that every gift comes with cost. And so humanity was born, whether by Prometheus's hands of clay or by his gifts of knowledge, it matters little. What matters is that from that moment onward, mortals were no longer shadows. They were apprentices of the divine, students of a Titan who defied heaven itself to lift them from darkness. But still, the greatest gift was yet to come. Fire remained hidden on Olympus, guarded by Zeus, withheld from men. And Prometheus, already bound to his fragile creation, already filled with compassion and foresight, knew that without it, mankind could never fulfill its potential. In the next chapter, the Titan would take the step that sealed his fate forever. He would steal the fire. To us, it is ordinary, a spark in the kitchen stove, a match struck in the dark, the steady glow of an electric light. But to the ancients, fire was mystery itself. It was warmth in the cold, light in the night, power over the raw materials of earth. It was danger and salvation, destructive when untamed, yet essential for life. To hold fire was to hold the difference between wilderness and civilization. And for the Greeks, it was the Titan Prometheus who first placed this divine flame into mortal hands. The story begins with Zeus. After Prometheus tricked him at Mecone, ensuring that mortals would keep the best portion of sacrifice while the gods received only smoke and bone, Zeus grew suspicious and angry. He resolved to punish mankind for the deception, and so he withdrew the gift of fire. Without flame, humanity returned to shadows. Their food remained raw, their nights cold, their tools unshaped. It was as though they had been thrust back into the helplessness of their earliest days, abandoned by heaven. But Prometheus could not watch in silence. He had already given mortals knowledge of crafts and arts, numbers and letters, farming and building. Yet without fire these gifts were useless, like seeds cast upon stone. He pitied the fragile beings who shivered in the dark, and he knew that their survival and their future depended on this one forbidden gift. And so Prometheus devised his plan. Some poets say he climbed to the very heights of Olympus, slipping unseen into the halls of the gods. There, at the blazing hearth of Zeus himself, he stole a spark. Others tell that he traveled to the workshop of Hephaestus, where the forge blazed with unending flame, and there he captured fire for his purpose. However it was done, Prometheus acted with cunning and courage, knowing that discovery would bring Zeus's wrath upon him. To carry the flame, Prometheus concealed it within a hollow stalk of fennel. The plant's pith was dry and fibrous, capable of holding an ember without extinguishing it. In this simple reed lay the greatest theft in myth, a god's flame hidden in a fragile stalk, carried down from heaven to earth. The image is striking. Fire, symbol of power and divinity, concealed not in gold or iron, but in something ordinary, humble, belonging to the world of mortals. It was a reminder that the greatest gifts often come hidden in the simplest vessels. When Prometheus placed the flame into mortal hands, the world changed forever. With fire, humans learned to cook their food, unlocking nourishment and strength. They learned to harden tools and weapons, to shape bronze and iron, to forge plows that cut deep into the soil. They lit torches to drive back the night, hearths to warm their homes, lamps to guide them through darkness. They gathered around flames to tell stories, to share warmth, to feel community. Fire was not only physical, it was spiritual, the center of home and city, the symbol of hope, the light that binds. But fire also gave humanity power that rivaled the gods. With it, they could create but also destroy. They could warm but also burn. They could build weapons of war as well as tools of peace. Zeus had feared this very outcome. He knew that to grant fire was to place in mortal hands something dangerous, something that would raise them from dependency to freedom. Prometheus, however, believed in their potential. He knew the risks, but he also knew that without risk, there is no growth. The poets often describe this gift as the beginning of techne, of craft and technology. Fire became the root of all invention. From the forge came metal. From metal came tools. From tools came cities. From cities came civilizations. The leap from darkness to fire was the leap from beast to human. Prometheus, by stealing flame, was not only giving survival, he was giving destiny. Of course, such defiance could not remain hidden. Zeus saw the glow of mortal fires, smelled the smoke rising from their hearths, and knew what had been done. His rage was immediate, unquenchable. The theft of fire was not only a crime, but a humiliation. A Titan had outwitted the king of the gods, defying his decree, breaking his order and empowering mortals whom he wished to keep low. This was not a minor transgression. It was rebellion itself, and rebellion could not go unpunished. In this moment, Prometheus became something larger than himself. He was no longer just a Titan. He was the archetype of the rebel benefactor, the one who suffers for others, who defies power in the name of compassion. His theft was an act of love for mankind, but also an act of defiance against tyranny. For the Greeks, this duality was essential. Every gift carries a price. Every freedom comes from struggle. Every light casts a shadow. Philosophically, the gift of fire is one of the deepest symbols in mythology. Fire represents knowledge itself, the spark of consciousness, the light of reason, the power to transform nature. To receive fire is to awaken, to move from instinct to thought, from survival to creation. But it also represents danger, the risk that knowledge will outpace wisdom, that power will be misused, that freedom will bring suffering as well as greatness. The myth of Prometheus is not a simple celebration of progress. It is a warning that every gift reshapes the balance of the world. For us, listening now, the story still resonates. Fire has changed, taking the form of electricity, of machines, of nuclear energy, of the digital light by which you hear these words. Yet the symbol is the same. Every time humanity discovers a new flame, we stand again in the place of Prometheus, holding power that can create or destroy. His myth is not past, it is present, repeated in every age of invention. And so, Prometheus's theft stands as one of the great turning points of myth. From fennel stalk to human hearth, from divine flame to mortal hand, he altered forever the destiny of mankind. For this, he would be celebrated by mortals as their champion, and condemned by Zeus as their corrupter. His punishment would be terrible, his suffering eternal. But for now, in this chapter, we linger at the moment of triumph, the moment when fire first crackled in mortal hands, when shadows fled and the night bloomed with light. The fire burns still. The fire burned in mortal hands, golden and defiant. It leapt from hearths, it glowed from torches, it hissed in forges where bronze was hammered into shape. Humanity, once trembling and weak, now stood taller, clothed in warmth and light. Prometheus had changed their destiny, but upon Olympus, smoke rising from human fires was not a symbol of progress. To Zeus, it was a sign of rebellion. Zeus, king of the gods, who had overthrown his own father and claimed the throne of the heavens, would not tolerate defiance. He saw in Prometheus's act not only disobedience, but insult. A titan daring to deceive him, a titan daring to grant to mortals what belonged only to the divine. His pride was wounded, and in that wound grew rage. To challenge Zeus was to challenge the very order of the cosmos, and Zeus's response would be merciless, but Zeus was clever as well as cruel. He knew that if he struck Prometheus alone, mankind would remain with their gift. The flame had already been given. It could not be ungiven, so his vengeance would fall on both Titan and mortal. The punishment would be layered, cruel in its subtlety, weaving suffering into the fabric of life itself. For Prometheus, Zeus devised a torment that would echo across eternity. But before he struck the Titan, he struck the mortals. If Prometheus wished to raise mankind, then mankind would pay for the theft. Zeus would not take back the fire. Instead, he would give another gift, one that seemed beautiful but carried sorrow. He called upon Hephaestus, the smith god, master of fire and forge, and commanded him to shape a being unlike any before. From clay, he molded a figure of perfect beauty, delicate and radiant. The other gods each bestowed gifts upon her. Athena gave her skill and craft, Aphrodite gave her charm and irresistible allure, Hermes gave her cunning and a tongue of persuasion. When she was complete, they named her Pandora, all gifted, for she carried within her the blessings of the gods. But beneath these gifts lay a curse, for Zeus placed in her hands a jar, later mistranslated as a box, sealed and heavy, which she was forbidden to open. It was filled not with blessings, but with every sorrow the gods could devise: sickness, toil, hunger, grief, old age, death. She herself was the final gift to mankind, the gift of deception, of beauty, concealing doom. Pandora was sent to Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus. Prometheus had warned his brother never to accept a gift from Zeus, never to trust the king of gods, for Prometheus foresaw the trickery behind divine generosity. But Epimetheus, afterthought, lived up to his name. He saw Pandora's beauty, her charm, her radiance, and he accepted her. Inevitably, curiosity overcame Pandora. She opened the jar, and from it burst every affliction that has haunted humankind since. Disease, famine, labor, sorrow, betrayal, war, despair. They poured into the world like smoke, filling every corner of human life. The age of innocence ended. From that day onward, no man or woman would live without suffering. Yet one thing remained in the jar. As Pandora slammed the lid closed, a single spirit was trapped inside, Olympus, hope. Some said this was mercy, that even as mortals suffered, they still clung to hope, the spark that sustains. Others said it was cruelty, that hope itself is an illusion, forever locked away, never fully ours. In either case, humanity found itself changed. They had fire, yes, but also suffering. They had progress, but also pain. Prometheus's gift had brought them closer to the divine, but Zeus's vengeance had bound them forever to toil and sorrow. And Prometheus himself. For him, Zeus had prepared a torment unlike any other. The Titan who had pitied mortals, who had shaped them from clay or guided them to knowledge, who had given them fire in defiance of heaven, this Titan would be bound. Zeus commanded that Prometheus be seized and taken to the far reaches of the earth, to the lonely crags of the Caucasus mountains. There, with chains unbreakable, forged by Hephaestus himself, Prometheus was bound to a rock. Day after day, an eagle, the great bird of Zeus, would descend upon him. It tore at his flesh, ripping out his liver, devouring it in agony. And each night, because Prometheus was immortal, his body healed. His liver grew back, only to be torn out again with the coming dawn. The punishment was endless, the cycle unbroken. Pain, healing, pain again. The fire that Prometheus had given mortals was now mirrored by a fire of suffering that burned endlessly in his own body. Here the myth reaches its most haunting image. Prometheus, chained to stone, suffering for a gift given to others, enduring torment not for his own sin but for his compassion. He became not only a rebel but a martyr, a figure of endurance, of sacrifice. The Greeks told this story not only as warning but as mirror. To defy power brings suffering. To help others invites wrath. Yet also, without such defiance, without such sacrifice, humanity would remain in shadows. Philosophically, the wrath of Zeus represents the tension between freedom and order, between the desire to rise and the forces that hold us down. Zeus punished Prometheus not because of the theft alone, but because Prometheus had challenged the very boundary between gods and mortals. To grant fire was to erase the line that separated them. For this, Zeus cursed not only the giver, but the receivers. The myth asks us, what price are we willing to pay for knowledge, for power, for progress? And what price are we already paying? For us today, the story of Pandora remains deeply resonant. We live in a world where every gift of knowledge brings new sorrows. Technology that heals also harms. Inventions that connect also isolate. Discoveries that empower also endanger. Each fire we light casts its own shadows. Like Pandora's jar, our world releases both wonders and terrors. And like Prometheus, we live caught between gratitude and suffering, between hope and despair. And so Zeus's wrath unfolded. Mortals burdened with sorrow, Prometheus bound in agony, Pandora remembered as the first woman whose beauty concealed doom. Yet through it all, one thing remained, the flame. The fire still burned in mortal hands, unquenchable, untaken. Zeus could curse, but he could not erase what had been given, and that flame, fragile yet eternal, would outlast even wrath. High in the barren peaks of the Caucasus, where winds cut sharp as blades and snow lingers even in summer, Prometheus lay bound. The chains that held him were not of ordinary metal, but of divine craft. Links forged by Hephaestus at Zeus's command, unbreakable, eternal. They bit into his skin, holding him against the cold stone, binding his arms wide, pressing his back into the mountain. Around him stretched silence, broken only by the whistling wind and each day the beating of wings. For it was not enough that Prometheus should be chained. Zeus decreed that his punishment would be endless torment. Each dawn, as the sun rose over the peaks, the great eagle of Zeus descended, its shadow sweeping across the snow, its talons outstretched. It fell upon Prometheus with hunger that was never sated. Its beak tore into his side, rending flesh, devouring his liver. Prometheus cried out, his voice echoing through the empty valleys. But no god came to his aid, no mortal could climb so high. He was alone, chained, and yet not allowed to die. Each night as darkness returned, his wound healed, the flesh knit together, the liver renewed. By dawn, his body was whole again, only for the eagle to return, to tear him open once more. This was the cruelty of his punishment, not death, but eternity. To suffer endlessly, to heal only to suffer again, to endure without end. The image of Prometheus bound is one of the most powerful in all mythology. It captures the paradox of rebellion and compassion, that to defy power in the name of others often brings suffering upon oneself. Prometheus had acted out of pity, out of foresight, out of hope for humankind, and for this he endured agony. The Greeks told this story not to glorify his pain, but to reveal a truth. Every gift carries a cost, and every act of defiance must be paid for in blood or sorrow. In the tragedy Prometheus Bound, attributed to Aeschylus, the Titan himself speaks from his chains, declaring his defiance even as he suffers. Behold me, the friend of mortals who gave them fire. For this I am bound, for this I endure. Let Zeus thunder, let him hurl his lightning, he cannot unmake what I have given. These words capture the essence of Prometheus's punishment. Though bound, though tormented, he remained undefeated. His body might be broken each day, but his will was unbroken. The eagle devoured his flesh, but not his spirit. His suffering became a form of resistance, a declaration that Zeus could punish but not erase, torment but not silence. The symbolism of the liver is profound. In ancient thought, the liver was the seat of life itself, the organ of vitality and spirit. To have it devoured daily was to have life itself consumed again and again. Yet because Prometheus was immortal, his life could not end. His torment was a cycle of vitality and violation, of life renewed only to be destroyed. It was the ultimate image of futility, yet also of endurance. To the Greeks, this punishment explained why mortals must suffer. Prometheus had given them fire, and in return, Zeus made sure that suffering would not end with Pandora's jar alone. The Titan's agony mirrored the struggles of mankind. Just as he endured endless pain, so too mortals endured toil, hunger, sickness, and grief. The myth connected divine rebellion to human existence. Our hardships are the echo of Prometheus' chains. Yet in this suffering lies something more. Prometheus became not just a rebel, but a martyr, a figure who endures torment for the sake of others. His agony was not meaningless. It was the price of progress, the cost of civilization, the sacrifice made so that mortals might have warmth, knowledge, and hope. In him, the Greeks saw the archetype of the suffering benefactor, the one who bears pain so that others may live better. Philosophically, the eternal punishment of Prometheus is about the weight of defiance. To challenge power, to cross forbidden boundaries, to give light where darkness was intended, is to invite suffering. But it is also about the endurance of spirit, the ability to withstand torment without surrender. Prometheus could not break his chains, but he could refuse to repent. His agony became his testimony, his silence became his defiance, his endurance became his victory. For us, listening now, the story speaks across centuries. We too know what it is to suffer for choices made, for values held, for compassion given. We know what it means to endure pain that does not end, to face struggles that repeat day after day. Prometheus' torment is not only myth, it is metaphor for every human who suffers for the sake of others, who endures because they will not abandon what they believe is right. And yet, even in the silence of the Caucasus, even in chains, even as the eagle's shadow swept across him, Prometheus's gift endured. The fire still burned in mortal hands. The hearths glowed, the forges sang, the cities rose. Zeus could punish, but he could not take back the flame. In this sense, Prometheus's punishment was both defeat and triumph. His body was broken, but his gift was eternal. So the Titan endured, chained to rock, liver torn and renewed day after day, century after century. The mountains watched, the winds howled, the eagle fed, and Prometheus in agony endured. The story of his release, the breaking of his chains, would come later, tied to the labors of Heracles. But for now, we linger in the image of eternal suffering, of a Titan who bore torment for the sake of mankind. It is a haunting image, but also a hopeful one. For it reminds us that even in suffering there can be defiance. Even in agony there can be meaning. Even in chains there can be freedom of spirit. And so Prometheus remains, bound upon the rock, enduring the eternal punishment of Zeus. His body is torn, his will unbroken, his gift unforgotten. The fire still burns. For countless ages, Prometheus endured. Bound upon the rock of the Caucasus, flesh torn by eagle's beak, liver consumed and renewed, his cries carried on the wind. The mountains bore witness, silent and unmoved. The gods of Olympus ignored him, some in pity, some in fear, none daring to oppose Zeus's will. Mortals, for whom he had suffered, could only imagine the torment, for no man could climb so high. And yet, the fire he had given them burned on. In every hearth and forge, in every meal cooked and every tool shaped, Prometheus's defiance lived. Even as his body bled, it seemed eternal. The punishment had no end. Time itself wore thin around him, the days repeating like an unbroken circle. But myths, like life, are never without change. And in the turning of ages, a hero arose, a mortal son of Zeus himself, whose path would one day cross the chained Titan's fate. This hero was Heracles, known to the Romans as Hercules, the strongest of men, destined for glory and suffering alike. Born of Zeus and the mortal woman Alcmene, Heracles was hounded by Hera's wrath, tested by labors that would break any other, yet he endured them all. In the course of his trials, he traveled far and wide to the edges of the world, confronting monsters, seizing treasures, performing deeds that reshaped the earth. And it was in one of these journeys that he came upon the desolate crags of the Caucasus, where Prometheus groaned in his chains. The eagle descended as it always had, wings spread wide, shadow cast over the stones, talons outstretched to tear once more at the Titan's side. But this time was different. Heracles, bow in hand, loosed an arrow swift and true. It pierced the eagle's heart, and the great bird, servant of Zeus, fell lifeless to the ground. For the first time in countless ages, the sky was silent. The tormentor was dead. Prometheus, still bound, lifted his weary eyes. He beheld Heracles, mortal yet radiant with strength, carrying in his frame both divine heritage and human courage. In that moment, the cycle of his suffering was broken. The eagle would no longer return. The daily torment was ended. Though chains still bound his arms, the shadow of agony lifted. The story of what happened next varies. In some versions, Heracles shattered the chains themselves, breaking the bonds that Hephaestus had forged and set Prometheus free. In others, the chains remained, for Zeus's decree could not be fully undone. Yet even in these accounts, Prometheus's torment was ended, for without the eagle, his suffering no longer renewed. Some poets tell that Zeus himself permitted this release, perhaps softened by the passage of time, perhaps wishing to honor his son Heracles by allowing him this deed. Others say Zeus demanded a condition, that Prometheus must wear a ring fashioned from the iron of his chains and a fragment of the rock to which he had been bound. In this way, his punishment would never be fully erased. He would carry his captivity as a symbol, a reminder of rebellion's price. This ring, so the myth suggests, was the first ever worn by mortals, and thus every ring since is a faint echo of Prometheus's bond. And so the Titan was freed, not triumphant, not unscarred, but released from endless agony. He stood once more, weary yet unbroken, his spirit still defiant. He had endured the wrath of Zeus, the bite of the eagle, the endless cycle of pain, and now he walked again upon the earth. The image of Prometheus unbound carries a different weight than his torment. It is not only about suffering, but about endurance rewarded, rebellion remembered, and freedom reclaimed. For the Greeks, this moment was more than myth. It was a symbol that even the greatest punishments can end, that even the longest nights can give way to dawn. Heracles, the mortal hero, brought relief where gods would not. Mortality itself, in the form of a man, broke what immortality had bound. Philosophically, Prometheus's release reminds us that no power, however absolute, remains unchallenged forever. Zeus could chain, could punish, could decree, but time and fate move beyond even him. The arrival of Heracles shows that rebellion's fruit is not only suffering, but eventual change. To endure is to create the possibility of liberation, even if it comes after centuries. For us, the story is a reminder of the strength hidden in endurance. Pain may last long, injustice may seem eternal, but change can come. Sometimes from unexpected places, sometimes from those who carry both divine and human in their nature, as Heracles did. Prometheus's chains are not forgotten, but his fire was never lost. His torment was not meaningless, for it gave birth to progress. And his release, whether partial or full, was a sign that defiance can survive punishment, that compassion can outlast cruelty. And so Prometheus was unbound. His chains shattered or transformed into a ring, his torment ended, his gift to mankind preserved. The eagle lay slain, the sky clear, the mountains silent. The Titan who had given fire to mortals walked free once more, scarred but unyielding, humbled but not defeated. The fire still burned, and now, so too did hope. The story of Prometheus is more than myth. It is an allegory, a mirror, a meditation on the human condition. In his rebellion, his gift, his torment, and his endurance, the Greeks saw more than a Titan. They saw themselves. And for centuries, poets, philosophers, and storytellers would return to Prometheus, interpreting him anew, shaping his meaning for each age. At the heart of Prometheus lies rebellion. He defied Zeus, the king of gods, not out of arrogance or ambition, but out of compassion for mortals. He stood against tyranny, not for his own power, but to empower others. This act alone set him apart. The Greeks knew many rebels, Kronos, who rose against Uranos, Zeus, who rose against Kronos, but Prometheus's rebellion was different. He did not seek a throne. He sought to uplift the weak. In him, rebellion became altruism. This is why philosophers such as Aeschylus and later thinkers looked to Prometheus as a symbol of justice against power. His chains were the price of resistance, but his gift was the proof that resistance is meaningful. The fire he gave could not be taken back. No punishment, however cruel, could erase his act. In this way, Prometheus became the embodiment of the truth that power may punish, but it cannot undo defiance once it has borne fruit. He is also the archetype of the suffering benefactor, the one who endures pain for the sake of others. His torment was not deserved, but chosen, because he valued humanity more than his own safety. In this sense, Prometheus is not unlike figures found across cultures and traditions: the martyr who suffers for truth, the teacher who is scorned by those he enlightens, the revolutionary who pays with blood for the freedoms of others. His myth whispers that progress is always purchased with sacrifice, and that the cost is borne not by the many, but by the few who dare to defy. The symbol of fire is perhaps the most enduring. To the Greeks, it was literal flame, the source of warmth and craft. But symbolically, it was knowledge, consciousness, technology, the spark that separates man from beast, that allows us to create, to destroy, to aspire. Fire is the double-edged gift. It can forge plows or swords, cook bread or burn homes. By giving mortals fire, Prometheus gave them freedom, but also danger. Zeus was not wrong to fear this. Every new power carries peril. Every light casts a shadow. Even today, Prometheus's fire burns in our inventions. The flames of his myth flicker in the glow of electricity, the hum of machines, the fire of nuclear energy, the pulse of digital code. Each new discovery is another ember, another risk, another hope. We, too, are heirs of Prometheus, holding gifts that can save or destroy, shaping destinies with powers beyond our full control. Prometheus also embodies the tension between fate and freedom. Zeus represented authority, law, the structure of the cosmos. Prometheus represented foresight, the refusal to bow, the belief that even within fate there is choice. The Greeks never fully resolved this tension. Instead, they told his story as a reminder that freedom is never absolute, but neither is authority. Between the two lies struggle, suffering, and meaning. Later thinkers drew upon Prometheus to express their own philosophies. The poet Aeschylus, in Prometheus Bound, cast him as the ultimate defiant figure, unyielding even under torment, refusing to submit to Zeus's will. Centuries later, in the Romantic era, poets like Shelley saw in Prometheus the image of humanity's eternal striving, the spirit that rebels against tyranny, that suffers for art, for knowledge, for liberty. In Prometheus Unbound, Shelley reimagined him not as a victim, but as a liberator whose endurance heralds a future free of oppression. Philosophers, too, took his story to heart. Nietzsche saw in Prometheus the spirit of creative suffering, the idea that greatness comes only through pain, that progress demands transgression. Marx saw in Prometheus the first rebel, the one who dared to side with mankind against the gods, a symbol of revolutionary defiance. Even modern psychology sees in him the archetype of the visionary: foresight that isolates, compassion that wounds, rebellion that liberates. Yet beyond philosophy, there is a quieter symbolism. Prometheus chained is the image of anyone who suffers silently for the sake of others, whose sacrifice is unnoticed yet essential. He is the teacher ridiculed by his students, the parent who gives without thanks, the worker whose toil sustains unseen. His chains remind us that much of human progress rests upon suffering that goes unrecognized, endurance that is invisible, compassion that is costly. For those who listened to this story at night around a hearth's glow, Prometheus was not only a titan, he was a mirror. His fire burned in their flames, his suffering echoed in their struggles, his endurance gave shape to their hopes. He was the one who made them more than beasts, who gave them the spark of divinity, and who paid for it with blood. And so, the symbolism of Prometheus is vast: the rebel, the martyr, the benefactor, the visionary, the teacher, the warning. His myth is not one meaning, but many, layered and endless. Like fire itself, it flickers, dances, shifts. One moment it warms, the next it burns. One moment it guides, the next it consumes. For us, Prometheus is the eternal reminder that to be human is to carry fire, and to carry fire is to carry both gift and curse. Our knowledge is our freedom, but it is also our burden. Our progress is our triumph, but also our danger. We live always in the balance between light and shadow, gratitude and grief. And Prometheus, chained to his rock, freed by Heracles, enduring through ages, stands forever at the center of that balance, his story told and retold, his fire burning still. The story of Prometheus does not end with chains, or even with release. His myth lives on because it speaks of something that did not belong only to the ancient world. It speaks of us. Every age has retold his story, for every age has wrestled with the fire he gave, and every age has carried the burden of his gift. To hear of Prometheus is not only to look back, it is to look inward, to see the eternal flame that burns within ourselves. Consider what fire has meant to humankind. The first mortals who gathered around it felt safety, warmth, and community. Fire turned night into day, fear into fellowship, hunger into sustenance. It allowed tools to be forged, cities to be built, voyages to be undertaken. It was the first step toward all the powers we now hold. The electricity that lights our homes, the engines that carry us across continents, the screens through which we share words and dreams. Every flame is a descendant of Prometheus's ember, every spark a reminder of his theft. Yet just as Zeus foresaw, every fire carries danger. Flames that warm can also burn. Weapons forged to defend can also destroy. Knowledge that heals can also corrupt. The nuclear fire that powers cities also threatens annihilation. The digital fire that connects us also consumes our attention, isolates our hearts. Prometheus's gift has never been safe. It has always been a double-edged light, one that grants freedom and demands wisdom. And this, perhaps, is why his story endures. It tells us that every step forward is paid for with risk, that every power demands responsibility, that every flame is also a test. Prometheus was punished because he trusted humanity with something that could not be controlled. He believed we were capable of greatness, and for that faith, he endured torment. His chains remind us that progress is never free, that knowledge always comes with cost, that to be human is to stand between shadow and flame. There is also, within his myth, the question of hope. When Pandora opened her jar and released sorrow into the world, only hope remained. Hope, fragile as an ember trapped but unextinguished. For the Greeks, this was no accident. Prometheus gave fire, Zeus gave suffering, but between them remained hope, the spark that allows us to endure, to rise again, to build even after loss. Without hope, fire would only consume. With it, fire becomes the light by which we move forward. Prometheus is also the image of our own inner struggles. Each of us carries a fire, a desire to create, to know, to dream, to rebel against limits. And each of us knows what it means to pay for that fire, with exhaustion, with sacrifice, with wounds that may never fully heal. In this sense, his chains are not only mythic, but personal. We too are bound by responsibilities, by fears, by the weight of choices. Yet within us, like within Prometheus, the flame persists. Philosophers and poets across centuries have seen him as our mirror. To Shelley, he was the spirit of humanity's defiance, unbowed before tyranny. To Marx, he was the first revolutionary, choosing mankind over gods. To Nietzsche, he was the embodiment of suffering that creates, of pain that births greatness. To the modern mind, he is the symbol of science and technology, of every discovery that lifts us higher, yet binds us tighter. In each age, Prometheus returns, because in each age we face again the question his myth asks. What will we do with the fire? And perhaps that is the heart of it. Prometheus trusted us. He gave us fire not because we were ready, but because we needed it. He believed that even in our weakness, even in our fragility, we could rise to meet the gift. His torment was not only punishment, but proof of his faith that mankind was worth suffering for, worth risking the wrath of heaven for. His myth endures because it is, at its core, a story of love. For us, lying in the quiet of night, listening as the mind drifts, the story of Prometheus is not only about gods and titans, it is about us, our struggles, our hopes, our fire. It reminds us that progress and suffering walk hand in hand, that freedom and responsibility cannot be separated, that to be human is to carry a flame that is both blessing and burden. And so, dear listener, as we close this journey, imagine the fire still burning, the first spark hidden in fennel, the first hearth glowing in the night, the first forge singing with hammer and flame. Imagine it passed from hand to hand, from age to age, until it rests with you here and now. The fire of Prometheus is in you, the fire of thought, of dream, of defiance, of hope. Guard it, cherish it, know its danger and embrace its light. For it is the eternal fire within us, the gift that makes us human, the spark that even gods could not extinguish. And so Prometheus endures, not only upon his rock, not only in chains, not only in stories, but in us, in every flame, in every dream, in every act of courage. His fire burns still. Good night. May your rest be warm and your dreams bright with light.